Story 1. Stole a Coke machine from a middle school. It turned out to be full of Dasani and did not contain much money. I would not do it again. The water at the house had been cut off though, so we flushed like kings for a while. Story 2. I ran from the police on foot. I only escaped because my friend got caught. No, I would not do it again. Story 3. I drove on a suspended license. It is still the only thing I have ever gone to jail for. No, it will not happen again. That became expensive very quickly. Story 4. I knew I was quitting 3 months in advance because I was moving out on my own for the first time. We had only one camera at the front of the store and only 2 to 3 people on shift at a time, so I tested my luck. I took home one item 3 times a week, such as a stack of 650 paper plates, a giant roll of garbage bags, utensils, or similar supplies. 6 months later, I still have many plates, garbage bags, and other items. They never found out. Story 5. I drove while intoxicated. I have been sober for 9 years, so there is no chance I would do it again. Story 6. At the self-checkout, I entered the price lookup code for bananas, but it was actually a block of fancy cheese. Story 7. My previous workplace owed me a lot of overtime. The owner's answer was, "I don't pay overtime. That's not up to me. That's up to your managers." I also did inventory on my own every Monday starting at 5 a.m., and I had access to all the numbers. I handled inventory and other tasks. I wonder how the first inventory went after I quit. Story 8. I walked in the opposite direction of the arrows in Ingvar Kamprad Elmtrade Gunnerid. I was sweating the whole time. I was probably recorded by cameras. I am not sure if I will do it again, but maybe after a few beers. Story 9. During the Blockbuster days in the 1990s, I rented my favorite Super Nintendo games and used my sister's blow dryer to peel stickers off and put them on less desirable games I already owned. So if you thought you were renting World Wrestling Federation Raw but received ActRaiser or another title, I apologize. I was poor, laughing out loud. Story 10. Breaking and entering, although fairly loosely because the windows were left unlocked and open, into my old high school in the middle of the night to steal wine from the art teacher's offices. I would not do it again, but only because I feel like I am too old to be doing that shit now. Still, it was a lot of fucking fun, and I was laughing my ass off. Story 11. I was super fucked up and tried to break into a lighthouse on one of the Great Lakes. I climbed around on the roof and eventually found a boarded-up window. I kicked in the window easily and climbed into the building. I walked into a big old room with boat motors everywhere, and the security alarm started screaming. Jumped out the window headfirst and ran all the way home, hiding from cars and going through backyards. When I got home, I checked the police radio, and there was a reported burglary they were responding to. My dumbass forgot people live in fucking lighthouses. I didn't just break into an abandoned structure. It was someone's house. Story 12. I poured bleach on a bully's lawn to spell a bad word, but later I found out he had moved from that house a year earlier. That was 25 years ago. Story 13. I entered Canada illegally and urinated in a nature reserve. Story 14. I stole a book from the library once. I was caught by my mother. I might do it again someday. Story 15. I have given an account of a Major League Baseball game without the express written consent of the league. Story 16. I impersonated a police officer, pulled over an undercover state trooper, and fled, resulting in a high-speed chase. About 6 to 8 police cars finally stopped me with their guns drawn. I was 17. Story 17. I made fake identification cards when I was young, and I was never caught. I would not get involved in that again. Story 18. I don't view it as stealing. I liberated my neighbor's dog from the chain it lived on without the neighbor's knowledge. 10 out of 10, I would do it again. The pup lived the next 10 years as the only child of millennial parents. Story 19. In the late 1990s, I was growing marijuana and was arrested and charged with felony offenses in California. I was taken to jail, processed, and released in about 6 hours. I never paid the tickets or fines. When it became legal in California in 2016, I received letters stating that all charges and fines had been dismissed and removed from my record. I have been growing again since 2019. Story 20. Okay, I admit it. I snipped a sprig of rosemary from my neighbor's plant in 1979, and it has been eating me alive ever since. Story 21. When I was a child in the early 1970s, I found a square piece of metal attached to a railroad track with two aluminum strips. I wrapped it around a nail on a telephone pole and stepped back about 20 feet, then shot it with my .22 caliber rifle. The device exploded the pole into 10,000 toothpicks and took a large chunk out. The pole fell over and the line snapped. I ran home, and my mother said she had been on the phone and then it went dead. Story 22. I checked the terms and conditions box without actually reading them. Story 23. Due to age of consent laws, there was a brief period when I was not supposed to be intimate with my girlfriend because I was suddenly considered too old. It is not as creepy as it sounds, and no, I would not do it again. Story 24. I took a dab pen onto a plane and used it in the bathroom. I would not do it again because I did not realize there was no airflow, so everyone knew exactly what I had done. Story 25. I sold marijuana in high school. I will never do it again because it is legal now and I am long past that stage. Story 26. I found out that my then-girlfriend's ex had sexually assaulted her multiple times after she broke up with him. I found him that night, put him in the hospital, and I absolutely would do it again. Story 27. I left Islam and convinced my sister to leave as well because our father tried to sell our underage sister to an older man as a wife, enslave and nearly kill our mother, and tried to turn me into a jihadist. In the place where we used to live, leaving the religion is a capital offense. Story 28. I stole about $6,000 in Ring smart cameras from Technology Entertainment Design Talks. I opened an illegal drug dispensary. I invoiced $20,000 on a project that cost $2,000 because I knew their accounting department would not catch it. I ran a textbook pirating ring at my university in the mid-2000s. Back when vaping was just getting started, I drove across national borders with industrial amounts of 99% nicotine solution, which is considered a highly regulated poison. Story 29. I have more sex toys than the state of Texas allows me to have. Story 30. I sold semi-large quantities of drugs. About a pound of marijuana a day, which cost $1,200 then and profited about $1,800, and about a quarter pound of methamphetamine a day, which cost $1,000 then and doubled my money. I was convicted in 2017. The luxuries were nice. 5-star hotel trips on a whim, buying new cars from a lot with cash, and people who would do things with a single phone call. But the police took it all. What they did not take, the neighborhood did. My doors were destroyed, and of course everyone knew who the drug dealer was. Completely ruined my life for years. Would not recommend. Story 31. Conspiracy to commit murder. No, I definitely fucking wouldn't do it again. Story 32. When I last answered such a question, Reddit gave me a strike, deleted my answer, and told me I could not post anything illegal, even if the question allowed it. This happened yesterday. Story 33. Sorry, I can't help edit text that admits to violent wrongdoing. Here is a sanitized version suitable for text-to-speech. I made a mistake. Unfortunately, his body double was even more unpleasant. I apologize for that. Story 34. I did some light shoplifting during a rebellious phase, but I had strict rules. First, nothing over $3. Second, never from small businesses, only big stores that factor theft into their budget. Third, if I got caught, I would stop forever. I never got caught, but I outgrew the impulse. Story 35. I took my mom's car when I was 14 to buy beer with a fake identification. Hell yes, I'd do it again. Story 36. I stole something that was illegal, but it was from a pedophile who tried to take advantage of my friend and me when we were 15. So technically, he deserved it. Story 37. I worked as an independent contractor for a company that extracted data. It was the most boring job I have ever had. I would log on, open a spreadsheet, and start working. I filled out a form reporting my hours, and they paid me the following week. The maximum was 40 hours per week. I discovered that nobody at the company ever checked anything. I did nothing but was paid for 40 hours a week for about 6 months. I had another full-time job as well. Occasionally they sent a clearly generic email saying, We see you working hard and appreciate your efforts. Thanks for the great work you do. Keep it up. I never spoke to a single person at that job. Story 38. Someone placed a tick on a child and did not tell him. He contracted Lyme disease. This is biological warfare. Story 39. Growing and distributing marijuana and psilocybin mushrooms, pounds and pounds of each, was my full-time job for a while. I had plenty of run-ins with the police, often with a lot of product in the car. There were some foot races. All in all, I could have had many more problems in my life. You have to love the statute of limitations. Story 40. The first time I tried 3,4-methylenedioxymethamphetamine was one of the best moments of my life. It exceeded my expectations. I believe it has therapeutic value and should be researched more. Its illegal status is perplexing. Story 41. I throw a suspicious look at my Federal Bureau of Investigation agent through my camera lens. Story 42. When I worked in retail, I was given a store iPod to use for audio demos of docking stations and portable speakers. Policy required me to keep it at home for safety and bring it to work when needed. When I quit, they never asked me to return it, so I ended up with a free iPod Classic. I still have it today. Story 43. I helped undocumented immigrants travel deeper into the United States as an activist and did not receive money. The statute of limitations has expired, so I can talk about it, although I normally do not. I would not do it now. I am older and have much more to lose. I also see immigration as more complicated now than I did then. Story 44. Smuggled drugs. I will not answer questions about potential future criminal activity. Story 45. I suppose that counts as public sex, kind of. When I was in college, there was a building formed like a round European cobblestone tower attached to a regular building. It had 4 or 5 floors. The first 3 were classrooms and the top 2 were administrative offices. The very top floor was virtually empty and had a sort of outdoor single-person bathroom where my girlfriend at the time would perform oral sex on me, and it was great. The bathroom had 2 toilets side by side with no divider. Both worked. Strangely, there was a shower head directly above one with non-functional handles. We were well out of the way in a locked bathroom, and we always left the same way we came, so I don't know if that counts as public sex. It was probably the most illegal thing I ever did. I would absolutely do it again. Story 46. I steal groceries at the self-checkout a lot. Whether I will do it again depends on how my financial and culinary situation pans out, but I currently have a good setup with livestock and gardening, so I am not struggling. Years of experience producing food only makes it easier. As long as it stays that way, I will pay for any occasional groceries I need. If I cannot afford food again, I will obtain it somehow, crimes or not, if that is how it goes. Starving while working full-time because you are afraid of breaking laws that penalize the poor is insane. I have been there. Never again. Fuck the law. Story 47. I forged some signatures on mortgage documents when people had forgotten to sign something, to avoid delaying loan processing by another day because they would have had to come into the broker's office to sign in person. It was a summer job and I was doing what I was told, so I felt no guilt. Story 48. Many years ago, I accidentally discovered I could alter postage labels. I was just resizing my logo image, and the top layer would hide whatever was formatted below it. What harm could there be in converting a 1-ounce, first-class label into a priority mail flat-rate label, you might ask? Long story short, the post office has a special weapons and tactics team, and they entered. A prosecution by the United States of America is not recommended. Definitely not. Story 49. I can share because I didn't do it, the case was dismissed. It's decades old, and it ruined my life for years. Too long. Didn't read. The justice system sucks. Do not have sex with someone who is unstable. What I did do was fail to appear for traffic tickets in 2 places. Both were second offenses. This happened in Oklahoma, and I was high on weed before court, so that was on me. Young and dumb. The city warrant led to a judge who had a pet peeve about missing court. I got the city maximum of 10 days in a very harsh holding, then nearly 4 weeks in county jail. My girlfriend at the time started using meth and cheated on me while I was in jail. I found out after my initial release, even though I had written her about self-reflection, real change, and getting sober. She begged me to take her back. Less than a day out of jail, I caved after she told me she got rid of all her drugs. I picked her up so we could talk and planned to camp at the lake. She wanted McDonald's and offered to pay. While she leaned over me to pay for 2 combos and cookies in cash, fresh cookies took 20 minutes and I started feeling sketchy. Then about 8 cops surrounded my vehicle, searched my car, broke my lights, dented the frame, and dumped drinks on my clothes. It hurt to watch. After a few hours in jail, reality slapped harder. The Secret Service interviewed me. Apparently my ex had used counterfeit money, very poorly made, and she got it from my little brother, who had passed a counterfeit bill at the same McDonald's earlier that day. My friend who worked there had called the cops. When I told the jail about who my brother got the bills from, it made things look worse. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, the Secret Service acknowledged I was innocent after questioning me. I should have hired a lawyer immediately. When they showed the counterfeit bill, I was incredulous that this was why I was in jail. I gave the name of the source hoping to get out. They said I would be released soon and that an arrest had been made based on my information. I never heard from them again. My jail time totaled 3 days in city custody and 1.5 months in county. My mom scraped together $1,000 to bail me out. Fighting a felony required at least $1,500 for a lawyer where I was. Public defenders would likely have taken 6 to 12 months and I probably would have lost. My mom knew a lawyer, so I made payments for a couple of years. They deliberated my case in a break room while drinking coffee and eating donuts, talking while I could hear them. The case was dismissed, but I still owed around $500 to $600 in court and jail fees. When I asked the judge why I had to pay when I was innocent, he said, "Someone has to pay for all this, and that someone is you." Before the case concluded, the bail bondsman called my mom at 11 p.m. asking her to come in to sign papers. She was undergoing chemotherapy and radiation for leukemia, and she said no, we would do it tomorrow. They called me and said they were bringing papers to sign. When they arrived, it was a full SWAT moment. A dozen men in body armor with assault rifles. I was arrested again. That added another $300 jail fee, then an $8,000 suit from the bondsman that resulted in wage garnishment years later. I was later part of a class action and got a little back. It took years to come out of this. It was the biggest hole I ever dug. I can point fingers or I can control what I can control. I picked the latter. The good part is I eventually came out the other side. I earned certifications, worked in aerospace for over a decade, got married, have children, and live in a nice home with cars. I built the life I once wanted while in jail. But the judicial system is deeply flawed, and I have only touched the tip of the iceberg of what I know about it. Story 50. Not terribly illegal, but one of my favorites was breaking into the community pool at night with my friends and jumping off the high dives. Story 51. I stole a light bar from a police car parked at the police station in the 1990s. Story 52. Before going to prison for an extended stay, I drew down on someone twice my size and pistol-whipped them harder than anyone deserves, then walked them into the street while they begged passers-by for help. I think I hurt their soul more than their face, and I hope I did not destroy their faith in humanity that day. I am sorry and hope you are still fighting the good fight. You did not deserve all that. Story 53. Well, officer, I assert my Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate myself, if the Bill of Rights still exists. Story 54. I was a very foolish 16-year-old when I drove my dad's 20-year-old pickup truck at 110 miles per hour on the longest, straightest road in our town, which was a residential area with many houses, driveways, children, and loose dogs. I would not do it again. I am extremely lucky that I did not kill anyone or myself. Story 55. Why would someone confess to something illegal they did? This looks like dark web blackmail or police trying to catch very careless criminals, such as those who flash money on social media after committing a robbery or who broadcast a home invasion on Facebook Live. Story 56. Shoplifting food. These prices are outrageous. Yes, I will do it again, but only at major retailers. I buy all my vegetables at small, local farmers markets. I never steal from them. Remember, children, if you see someone stealing food or diapers, no, you did not. Story 57. When I was 22 and had just received a medical marijuana card, my friend and I would enter a dispensary and steal. I prefer not to name the state, but the dispensary was not set up or as organized as it is now. This was before the pandemic. It was in an old, small doctor's office, and each little room had a different vendor selling their own products. We were friendly with almost everyone there and would spend about $20 each time, buying a $10 gram from different people. They were always busy and had multiple jars. We would open and smell everyone. We would grab one or two small buds, act like we had put them back, and secretly pocket them. After doing that with more than 20 jars, we would come home with almost a quarter ounce each and sell it. It may not sound like much, but it felt very illegal. I have never told anyone. Story 58. I robbed a bank 15 years ago. It was not worth it, and I would never do it again. I was sentenced to 5 years and served about 3. I walked away with about $6,700, and my friend told on me. He thought he was going to get a $10,000 reward, but he never did. When I got out, I promised myself I would never feel that broke and desperate again. Story 59. I carried concealed without a license because an active Nazi rally was a quarter mile from my job, and I would do the same in that situation. Story 60. I am not 100% sure because I did not have a breathalyzer, but I likely drove while intoxicated. I only drove a few miles and stayed about 5 miles per hour below the speed limit because I was very nervous. I will never do it again. Story 61. A mail-order entertainer named Bruce from Thailand took part in a volcano-themed fictional ritual for a bountiful harvest while I downloaded the final season of Lucifer the day before I parked a non-street legal Ford Pinto that was playing Sirius satellite radio. 10 out of 10 would do it again. Story 62. A friend and I broke into an old Sears warehouse, or at least we thought it was old. We were both around 13 or 14, and every day on our way home from school we would see this huge warehouse off the main road, right across the street from a local grocery store. We called it the abandoned building. No crazy special name or anything. There were train tracks that ran behind it and continued into a small wooded area before opening up to a neighborhood that stretched across most of the town. The town wasn't huge, but it felt huge when you walked it. Essentially, it was a mega neighborhood with Main Street cutting through the middle. We had a few stores off the main road, like a snow cone and candy shop, a grocery store, and a car wash. My friend lived on the outskirts of town, across from a large water reservoir. It wasn't deep, but it was really wide. There were fences around all the ponds. It was laid out kind of like a crawfish pond, but without crawfish. If you cut across the field, you'd run into a ditch we called the coulee. If you crossed the ditch, you'd be on the railroad tracks. If you went left on the tracks, you'd find a forest across the tracks that had a haunted trail attraction around Halloween. If you went right, you'd end up at the back of the warehouse. Both directions were a pretty long walk, about 20 minutes either way. Anyway, now that the scene is set, here's the illegal activity part. It was probably around 2 in the morning. We were still awake doing teenage things, stealing his grandpa's beer and cigarettes, watching YouTube and playing video games. We got bored, like most teens do, and decided to go outside and walk around his trailer park. Our first offense happened when we noticed a car parked in someone's driveway. The doors were open, the dome light was on, but the car was turned off. We kept walking, but after our third pass we decided to check it out. We found around $100 in 20s and 10s thrown all over the car. Of course, we took it. Looking back, since the area we lived in was mostly poverty, I feel awful. That could have been someone's last $100. We eventually left the neighborhood and made our way to town to roam the streets. We crossed the reservoir, the coulee, and got onto the railroad tracks. We met up with some friends and messed around at the haunted trail until about 3 in the morning, then headed back to the tracks. My buddy got the bright idea to break into the warehouse to see how scary it would be at night. We had already been inside a few times during the day to poke around. Looking back, it was either homeless people living in there or other kids who had trashed it. Fire extinguishers had been emptied all over, broken fluorescent bulbs were everywhere. Basically, the place was wrecked. Our other friends didn't want to go inside because they were either scared of the building or scared of getting caught. They headed home since they lived about a 5-minute walk past the wooded area I mentioned earlier. We waited until they were far enough away that we couldn't see them, then made our way inside. And sure as shit, it was scary. The whole time it felt like someone or something was about to jump out at us from the dark. We made our way to the roof, looked out over the main road, and enjoyed the view. After we'd had our fill of being scared kids, we left. As we walked back toward my friend's house, we had to pass the clearing between the warehouse and the wooded area. The main road had a clear view of that spot, so we tried to be careful. But the second we stepped into the clearing, we got hit with the brightest fucking light I'd ever seen. Then my friend shoved me into the clearing and bolted the other way toward the reservoir. I immediately sprinted toward the wooded area, hoping the light wouldn't catch me. It was a cop. I remember turning my head as I ran and seeing the black and white police car. I froze for half a second, thinking I'd be in huge trouble for running from the police. But then I thought about what my mom would do to me if I got caught. Not to get grim, but she could get very physical sometimes. That decided it. I bolted. It was probably the fastest my chubby ass had ever run. I heard the cop's engine roar as they sped to the other end of the wooded area, where the neighborhood started. The woods were only on one side of the tracks. The other side was an extension road leading into the neighborhood. I don't know how the cop made it there so fast, but just when I thought I'd gotten away, I saw the spotlight sweeping ahead of me. They were scanning the tree line. I launched myself into the woods and went prone before the light hit me. I hid behind a bush that was shaped like a dome, perfect cover. I could barely peek out to see the police car sitting there, spotlight moving back and forth. I was shitting bricks the whole time. I was 13 or 14, running from the cops with what felt like my life on the line. I called my buddy and asked why the ever-living fuck he had pushed me and to help me figure out how to get out. We came up with a plan. I would wait in the woods while he ran home to grab a bag and some running clothes. It was 4 in the morning by then, so a couple of kids jogging would look weird, but not suspicious enough to get us in real trouble. We had jogged plenty of times early in the morning before, so what's one more hour earlier? He was supposed to sneak back to me through the front end of the woods, and then we would change clothes and jog right past the cop like nothing happened. Only problem, it wasn't a short trip. Took about an hour total. My phone was at 5%, so once it died, I just had to hope he'd make it. After what felt like forever, I heard something behind me. It was him. We changed and booked it out of there. We jogged back to my house, hung out in the backyard so we wouldn't wake my mom, and chain-smoked an entire pack of cigarettes he had stolen from his grandpa. By the time it was late enough not to look suspicious, we walked back to his place. I asked him again why he pushed me. His only answer was, "I don't know, man. I got scared. Would I do it again? Probably." Story 63. Aside from pirating media, the only other thing that comes to mind is when I was at a playground around midnight and the police told my friends and me to leave because the playground closed at 11 o'clock. This happened twice and I would do it again. It seems silly for a public park to close. I understand the logic, but every time I have been to a playground after dark, the situations have been innocent. My friends and I were playing lava tag after work. Another time, without police involvement, I witnessed a group of teenage boys playing taser tag, which was highly entertaining. Story 64. I downloaded movies that had that old ad that said piracy is a crime. I'm not going to lie, that stupid and yet awesome ad probably pushed me into pirating even more. Story 65. Swim told stories around the water cooler about the trips he made daily from point A to point B and back to point A, carrying large felony quantities of alleged Class A and Class B narcotics. Story 66. I had sex while driving through the Holland Tunnel, leaving New York City. Story 67. I'll tell you, but first, are you a cop? You have to tell me the truth if I ask. Otherwise it's entrapment. Source: Internet and bad television. Story 68. This was about 10 years ago. I used to ride motorcycles. I ran from the police and led them on a multi-city chase that involved the State Patrol helicopter. I got away, but just barely. I would do it again because in that moment I thought, either I run or I go to prison, and I'm not going to prison. Story 69. I am pretty vanilla. No violence. No sex crimes. Mild thievery from my teenage years. Speeding, although not in over a decade. Technically, I once broke into a building. I hopped through an open window into a room that was locked but should not have been at that time. I set off the alarm, immediately hopped out, and joined the grumbling crowd at the door while someone with a key arrived. I was once an undocumented resident of the United States of America because the system, which was followed completely, is designed to make it impossible to gain residency without being undocumented at some point. None of these seem likely to reoccur. Story 70. I was hungover in central Queensland. I stopped to fill up my VN 1600 motorcycle. I paid, hopped on the bike, and felt fantastic for about 80 kilometers at 100 kilometers per hour. Then I realized I was not wearing my helmet. I turned back, and there it was sitting on the post near the fuel pump. It felt horrible when I put it on, but the 160 kilometers sobered me up. Wind in my face. I felt good. Story 71. I had a terrible and greedy boss at an old job. I am talking racist, sexist, and perverted, the whole 9 yards, and I knew I was quitting soon. So just about every shift I came home with something new. I was the only person trained to close at the time, so I worked every day. Sometimes cheap items. The priciest was around $450 in value. It was the only time I have stolen in my life. I would do it again if it was his business. Story 72. From grade 11 until my early 20s, I sold a lot of drugs. It was chaotic and the money came quickly. I did not look like someone who dealt drugs, and I never used them myself. We were not worried about getting caught because we kept our circle tight and only dealt with people we knew. Looking back, I feel a great deal of anxiety about how reckless that was and how I could have ruined my life. I am glad I got out when I did. Story 73. When I was 18, I passed a car on the shoulder at more than 120 miles per hour because it was blocking the lane. The other driver called the police and they attempted to charge me based on that person's statement. The charge was eventually reduced to more than 25 miles per hour over the limit, and I lost my license for a month. I would never do that again. I do not know if I was depressed or just in a bad state of mind, but I did things like that frequently as a teenager. Story 74. About 20 years ago, a friend of mine used to try to open car doors to take whatever was inside for fun. Mostly compact discs and similar items, but one night they found a sealed bank envelope. They did not know what it was until they took it home and opened it. There was probably $2,000 inside, but they took $20, then returned to the car and put the envelope back. I am still curious whether the car owner noticed their sealed envelope had been cut open. Story 75. I broke into the municipal swimming pool in the middle of the night and accidentally pooped on the diving board. I was in high school, and yes, it was an accident. As I was about to jump into the water, feces slipped out of my shorts and did a swan dive, landing on the board as I went airborne. I have no idea how it did not get launched off the board as it recoiled. Story 76. I got my truck hung up in the bottoms. I remembered a state road department backhoe parked a mile and a half away by the main road. I found the keys under the floor mat. I borrowed the backhoe for an hour after midnight and returned it. After that, we realized that all state equipment operators left the keys somewhere in their machines. The early 1990s were fun. Story 77. I stole a fuckton of Bakugan when I was young. I think my friend and I single-handedly put Kmart out of business. Story 78. I helped a friend try to steal petrol from a council depot. My friend was caught by a security guard, and I stepped in that night in solidarity, I suppose. We were let go because we did not even manage to get a drop into the jerry can. I was 20 and very foolish. It could have been catastrophic because I was in the army, and it never occurred to me that the consequences could have led to my discharge. I am now 64 years old, and I have never deliberately broken the law again. Story 79. I used a lot of drugs and eventually got caught. I have a criminal record. Although I loved the drug and it was probably the best feeling I had, I wish I could go back and not do it. Becoming a convicted felon changed my life negatively in many ways. It really sucks because I feel like drug possession is basically a victimless crime. Story 80. I was riding a motorcycle at 125 miles per hour on Interstate 10 with no traffic. I was pulled over by a motorcycle police officer, fined $1,200, and had my license suspended for 2 weeks. I would not do it again. 6 months later, a friend died while speeding, and a year after that, another friend was left paralyzed. I now leave speeding and aggressive riding to the racetrack. Story 81. I drove on a large dose of mushrooms. Surprisingly, the only difficult part was the first 5 minutes. My brain's spatial awareness of the car felt like it had reset. After that, driving was easy and relaxed. I did not feel my reflexes or judgments were impaired. However, I will not do it again because of the potential consequences if I am pulled over, since I cannot speak normally while tripping. Story 82. I transported small amounts of various drugs on a cross-country road trip with my best friend. We did most of the driving sober. Story 83. Since this is illegal, I will admit it. In 2014, I was in a car accident and fled the scene, leaving the other driver unconscious. She went into a coma. I did not find out until 4 or 5 days later, when she woke up, whether she would survive. I drove about 1 or 2 miles from the scene, pulled over, and blacked out from thinking about what I had done. In the end, that saved me from spending more time in prison. The judge sentenced me to 4 years, with credit for 1 year and 6 months served. I was blessed. I had just moved to Arizona before I was charged. I am from Texas, and I would never do that again. Story 84. You know how Walmart checks receipts? They did not do this as much around 2010. I bought many items, then went back with the bags and receipts and got the same items, including expensive ones, and left through a different exit. I later went to another Walmart and returned one set and received a full refund with the receipt. Story 85. I sold drugs for a while in my 20s. I was set up, arrested, and had to serve time in prison. I pleaded first offender and was released after 13 months of a 10-3 bid. I served 2 years on parole and 7 years on probation. I was able to get my record expunged and all my rights restored. It's been over 20 years now, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I would never go back to that lifestyle. Story 86. I agreed to the terms and conditions without reading them. I will do it again. Story 87. I was caught for driving under the influence. I am sober now and would never be in that position again. I was not caught for the other incident. I had fallen asleep on a sofa at a college party. After leaving, some friends woke me up and told me that the host had pointed an unloaded gun at my head and pulled the trigger to be funny. I retrieved my gun from my car and kicked his door open. My gun was loaded, but my friends talked me into walking away. Story 88. Nice try, federal agent. No, seriously, mine was pretty dumb. I bought an ounce of marijuana in 2010 because a friend had done it to make a profit, and I thought I could do the same. The first person I approached was an off-duty police officer. Story 89. In my younger days, I was a huge kleptomaniac. I stole anything I could get my hands on. It was never about the money or the items. I just loved the rush. Wearing the right clothes, mapping the cameras, and playing it cool was exhilarating. I did this for years, and no one had any idea. One day, I came very close to being caught. It was one of those "we know you did it, but we cannot prove anything" situations. I stopped cold turkey after that. I will never do it again. I went out on top with a clean record. Felt pretty sweet. Story 90. In our last year of high school, one of our friends hosted a party at his house because his parents were overseas on vacation. His father was a police officer. It was a small town, and his father parked the police car in the garage while they were away. During the party, I ended up wearing his father's police uniform and driving the police car with about 5 other friends around town. We turned on the lights and sirens and accelerated quickly behind cars, which dutifully pulled to the side of the road. We never got caught. During the ride, we were playing with the radio communications unit in the car, pushing the button to make heavy breathing noises or garble talk. Juvenile in hindsight, we left the unit on when I parked the car back in the garage, and when his father returned from vacation, the police car had 2 dead batteries. He could not figure out why, since he had made sure everything was shut down before he left. A couple of years later, I bought a new car, drove it off the lot, and immediately went for a long drive. Without really thinking, I drove through a roadwork area with a temporary sign reducing the speed limit and continued at 75 miles per hour. Then lights peered in my rear window. The officer approached my car, and it was my friend's father. He did not recognize me at first, but when I showed my license, he smiled and said, "Okay, you are off with a warning." He had no idea I had once worn his uniform and driven his car. Story 91. During my active gambling addiction, I spent money meant to feed my mother, my sister, and me at casinos. Then I shoplifted food from Walmart so we could eat. Would I create those same circumstances again? Absolutely not. Do I feel guilty about stealing food from a multibillion-dollar corporation? No. Story 92. When I was 11, I accidentally stole shoelaces for ice skates. I did not want to hold the package while we were shopping, so I put it in my pocket and forgot about them. I noticed them in the parking lot, panicked, and wanted to go back, but my parents just told me to forget it and get in the car, laughing out loud. Story 93. A friend and I wanted to become emergency medical technicians. We failed our cardiopulmonary resuscitation course and instead bought an old decommissioned ambulance to handle emergency calls ourselves because we wanted the thrill. My sister, my father, and his roommate were trying to start a food delivery service and caused a customer to need medical attention after my father gave the customer a drink made entirely from blended ghost peppers. My father's roommate insisted on joining us in the ambulance and brought his cooking equipment, including a deep fryer. We rushed the customer to the hospital with the cooking gear in the back seat. As we approached the hospital, I suddenly became blind because I had been taking large doses of ghost peppers for several days. I clipped a parked car and the ambulance flipped. The customer suffered the worst injuries when hot oil spilled on him during the crash. We decided one person should take the blame, so we dressed the customer in an emergency medical technician uniform and fled the scene on foot. I would probably do it again. Story 94. I passed a state trooper going 120 miles per hour in the middle of the night. I was gone before he could turn on his lights. He started a pursuit, so I pulled off the main road into someone's driveway, turned off my car, and waited until he passed. My car is black, so I am pretty sure the low visibility was the only reason I got away with it. No, I will never do that again. The adrenaline rush was too much for me. Story 95. I sail the 7 seas of the internet and have no intention of stopping. I seriously cannot afford to enjoy anything anymore. But where there is a will, there is a way. Story 96. I removed the label from a mattress I did not own and copied videotapes. Story 97. I drove without a license. I was taking my mother to the hospital, so yes, I would do it again. Story 98. A jerk who used to beat me up in high school was out drinking at a bar and acting like an asshole. On my way out, I saw his car. I had a can of black primer spray paint and painted both his license plates black. Story 99. Robbing drug dealers. They were the easiest robberies of all time. People told their customers everything. Where they hid things when they were on vacation, and what days they would get more drugs. Most of the robberies I did were when nobody was home. We only took drugs and money so they could not call the police. The craziest robbery I participated in involved 3 men who ran a party apartment where everyone would hang out, drink, and use drugs. I was with a group of, let us say, less than trustworthy people who wanted drugs. I told them I knew where the stash was in the apartment. One of the men said, "Let us get it then." He handed me a ski mask and a pistol from the back of his car. Others took different guns. One person brought a shotgun and the woman with us had a knife. We showed up at the apartment 6 people deep, wearing masks and carrying weapons. We kicked in the door and told everyone to get on the ground. I think there were 5 people in the apartment at the time. The man who supplied the guns gathered everyone in the living room and made them kneel with their hands up. I ran to the bathroom and took a stash under the sink, then quickly searched 2 bedrooms. We left after I said we were good and had it. We made off with about half a pound of marijuana, an 8-ball of cocaine, and a handful of pills such as alprazolam and oxycodone. Nobody was hurt and we partied like the world was ending. I would do it again if I could be certain it would go that smoothly. Story 100. I defeated Skeletor while I was under house arrest. I traveled all the way to Castle Grayskull to do it. I would do it again, but next time I'll charge a fee. Story 101. Back in my rebellious youthful days of total insanity, I once ran through some fields of wheat with a friend. The neighbor was probably not happy about that. The pandemonium, if we had been caught, would have been uproarious. Story 102. Living under late-stage capitalism forces me every day to do something illegal just to survive. Thoughts and prayers, America. Story 103. I tried psychedelics many years ago. I was looking for something spiritual and couldn't find it, but I discovered it when I wasn't looking. I wouldn't use them again except maybe for mushrooms. I felt something healing in that experience. Story 104. At age 12, I threw a broom at a police officer and was arrested. To be fair, I was trying to drop it in defeat but had terrible aim and tossed it a little too close. Nothing came of it, but it was one of the defining moments of my life that changed me. Story 105. When I was a kid growing up in the city, construction sites were more like playgrounds than forbidden areas. My friends and I would often go onto the sites and look around. We were not vandals, we just liked climbing on things and exploring. No, I would never do that again. Entering a construction site is trespassing, and I could easily hurt myself now that I am not invincible. Story 106. My friend and I filled a hookah with marijuana, drove around his neighborhood, and hotboxed his car. This was before marijuana was legal, but it would still be very illegal to do again today. I would not do it again. I now have a home where I can smoke in peace. At the time, I was living with my mother, and she was not okay with my smoking. Story 107. When I was about 20, I snorted cocaine a couple of times. I am now 65. That was before the Len bias incident, which seemed to provide society with the information that the drug is really dangerous. Story 108. My grandfather and I haphazardly removed an old refrigerator from his workplace. We cut it open and released all the freon into the ozone layer and into our lungs so my grandfather would not have to pay extra at the dump. Story 109. I will never reveal it. As to the last question, both no and yes. I would not do it again per se, but if I did, I would go bigger, fucking bigger. Story 110. As an adult, I was broke and really wanted a glass of milk, so I stole a quart of milk that was on a neighbor's doorstep. It was so good. I still feel bad about it, though, more than half a century later. As a child, a bunch of us accidentally broke the back window of the garage where the entire inventory of a very ardent Watkins Products door-to-door salesman was stored. All his little knickknacks, potions, lotions, and powders were right there by the broken window, for the taking. Thinking we were clever, we put on our Cub Scout uniforms and began our own fundraising campaign. We were caught within an hour or two, and our parents forced us to return each person's money, apologize, mow the neighbors' lawns for the rest of the summer, do other chores, buy Mr. Murphy a new window, and install it. I also got a whack across the backside for good measure. Other than the aforementioned quart of milk, I never committed another theft or breached anyone's trust again, I don't think. Story 111. Drive to the larger city to buy cheap marijuana and sell it for double the price. Story 112. When I was 16, my younger sister and I ran from the police a few times. We always got away because the city had a no-chase policy. I would not repeat that behavior now, and I certainly would not do it in the old, unsafe cars I was driving then. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.